Good morning, everyone. We're just waiting for folks to come into the room and then we'll get started. Thank you for joining us today. I can see that there's 5 of us in here with us so far. Rochelle and I are excited to speak with you this morning. We'll get started in about a minute and then we'll do a quick intro and then Rochelle will take it away. Alrighty, we'll get underway. Good morning, folks. My name is Courtney Northrup. I am the Learning Coordinator with the BCN PHA team. Looking forward to sitting in on this webinar this morning. I'm here as any sort of tech support or assistance. I'll be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to utilize the chat, utilize the Q&A, and we'll get going. This session is being recorded. So that we can view it later and it'll be posted up on our website, and I'll email out the link to the registered participants as well once it's all been edited through. So I will love to welcome my teammate and my colleague Rochelle, who will be leading us through the webinar this morning.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Courtney. Thanks everybody for joining this morning for the webinar on navigating your building's energy consumption and specifically looking at Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So we have a quick 30-minute format for you. I will present for about 20 to 25 minutes and then we will have 10 to 5 minutes at the end for Q&A. My name is Rochelle Gross, and I am an asset management coordinator and energy specialist with BCN PHA. My background is in engineering, where I focused on sustainability and conserving existing buildings. I've worked with BCN PHA for the past 3 years, and I provide energy audits and energy coaching for the nonprofit sector. So I'm zooming in today from Vancouver, and I'd first off like to acknowledge that I'm joining virtually today from the unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. And as many of you may be joining throughout the province, I'd also like to acknowledge that our work at BCN PHA takes place across BC throughout the ancestral lands of many of the unceded territories of 198 First. So today's goal, we have the 4 main things that I'd like to be the outcome of today's webinar. So the first thing is, well, what is the energy benchmarking? Why is it useful? Why are people doing it? And why might it be beneficial for your organization? And then one of the main tools for doing this, especially in Canada, and I'll talk more about that, is Energy Star Portfolio Manager. You may have heard of it. You may be already having an account and monitoring your utility data, but it can be quite complex when you're first starting with it. So I want to show how does it work, what are the main features, and what would be useful specifically to a nonprofit organization using Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And then BCN PHA does provide assistance for energy benchmarking. So I'm going to describe what the process of that is like, who would be eligible for this service, and then how does that tie into the rest of our asset management services. So if you're not already familiar with our asset management team, we are a growing team. I think we're about 10, now 12 of us on our asset management team, with a few new additions. We help the nonprofit sector by helping to plan for their future for their buildings and helping to maintain buildings that are both comfortable and high performing. And we do that through a number of services. Some of them are services such as capital planning, building condition assessments, or access to our partner program through a property management software. And then we also have free services specifically to help with energy efficiency in the sector, and that would be doing free energy audits, going out to visit your building and identifying measures, and then from there helping you implement measures through energy efficient retrofit coaching or general retrofit coaching, where we help you access funding and incentive programs, and then what I'm talking to you about today, and our lesser known service, energy benchmarking, which is a really great starting point for accessing the rest of these services. It's free and it's really a simple measure you can start with, especially if you don't know where to begin with all of this. So energy benchmarking. To put it as simple as possible, it is tracking and monitoring the energy performance of the building over time. We benchmark a lot of things, and it's simply just to compare how you were doing over time, or comparing to similar metrics, so similar buildings, and taking energy you're using currently and comparing it to how it was doing in the past. And so it's one thing to have energy data available in front of you. However, it's only really useful if you are analyzing and identifying how it can be useful to your organization, and need tools to do that, and specifically energy benchmarking tools. And so the main two questions that you would want to ask is, once you have that utility data in front of you, how do we know which of your buildings are the poor performing ones? And from there, once we know our poor performing buildings, which ones would benefit the most from an energy efficient upgrade? And that is where some of these other services come into play, such as the energy audit, a building condition assessment, and can really help to narrow down and identify, well, what would be the next steps to take to make your buildings more efficient and better for your tenants. So like I said, it's one thing to have your energy data in front of you. However, just looking at your monthly consumption alone isn't really enough to tell you, which ones are your poor performing ones. And that's because there's a number of variables that impact energy consumption, and that can be things like just simply the size of the building. A bigger building is going to use more energy. Where it's located, a colder climate, you're going to need more heating energy. And then even extreme weather events, like we had a very, very hot summer and a cooler winter, and because of that, we're going to need more energy to both heat and cool your building. So we need to be able to differentiate year by year. We may have had an extreme weather event, and we need to compare equally and account for this difference in a weather event. And then, of course, there's different types of building types, and depending on your tenant and the use in your building, that's going to impact how you're using your energy. So what benchmarking does is it takes into account all these variables and then allows us to better compare all the buildings in your portfolio. So say you have a care facility, that's going to use a lot more energy than a simple single family home. And then, of course, the single family home is going to use way less energy. And how do we compare to different building types? So one of the key metrics to energy benchmarking is called your energy use intensity. And it's quite simply the total energy use on an annual basis for your building per floor area. And so the units for that are going to be something like kilowatt hour per meter squared, or GJ per meter squared is usually the metrics you see in Canada. And then you may also see energy use intensity seen as a TEUI, and that simply just means your total energy use intensity. And now the fact that we call it the total energy use intensity is important because we need to look at the entire building. And in some cases, it is difficult to look at energy consumption data for your entire building, especially in the nonprofit sector, because you may have your residential suites metered differently and are not able to access that and see that data. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we can get that data for you. And so once you know your energy use intensity, it's great to have a visual to see exactly where you're at. So BC and BHA created an energy scorecard, which takes your utility data, takes into account those factors such as the weather events, so weather normalizes data, and then also looks at it per floor area. And so the graph on the left here shows 5 buildings, and then you can clearly see based on the energy use intensity, building 4 and 5 would be your poor performing buildings because they have a higher energy use intensity. So if you're trying to figure out a strategy of, well, which buildings would benefit the most from upgrades, or where should we spend our time investigating what maybe some of the causes of a higher energy use might be, it would be best to start with building 4 and 5. And then the graph on the right would show your energy use over time. So you have here 2017 versus 2020, and looking at per building your electricity use and your natural gas use. And this graph would be more specific at showing you, well, which buildings use more natural gas and has it been increasing over time. This example you can see is actually going down. So that would indicate that maybe a retrofit was done, and then this would help to show the benefits of that. So to give a little context of what's going on with benchmarking in BC, benchmarking is the norm for many cities across US, Europe, and Australia. They have already adopted mandatory benchmarking programs where they need to report their energy use data and then sometimes often disclose it, which means that they share their data publicly. That way people, similar organizations, similar buildings can then compare against each other, and is really an effective tool at promoting energy efficiency. And so in Canada right now, Ontario is the only province to mandate energy use. And so they require energy usage data reporting for buildings that I believe are 100,000 square foot or greater, and then eventually will make it so that it's for smaller buildings through a phased approach, I think about 50,000 square feet in the next 3 years. And so a lot of places where they don't have mandatory benchmarking have created voluntary benchmarking programs, and we have a great one in BC called Building Benchmark BC. And I encourage you to go check them out, and they promote disclosure in BC's their building types. And this is important for us as well, because in the nonprofit sector, we really don't have a benchmark to compare our buildings to. So the more data that BC and PHA can collect on the sector, the more that we're able to better advocate for the energy needs in the sector. So moving on to Energy Star Portfolio Manager. So the reason why ESPM is used quite frequently is because it's a really easy, free online tool to use. It was developed by the US Environmental Protection Agency to allow for benchmarking in different types of buildings, and they create metrics that compare different building types, like I mentioned before. You can have multifamily housing, you can have commercial buildings, schools, hospitals, that thing. And then in Canada, the NRC can adopted this as their national benchmarking tool. And that way, in Canada, we now have specific Energy Star ratings that help us compare different climate zones. And then energy use intensity averages across Canada. And that starts to help allow us to have benchmarking metrics to compare our buildings. So if you're just starting out with Energy Star Portfolio Manager, it can seem intimidating because there's a lot of different things you can track in there. And then the other main question is, how do you even get your data in there? How do we put a building? And that's really where BC and PHA can help support your organization. We can take a lot of the stress out of trying to figure out this program and accurately input your data and your building information. And then there's also the feature of web services, which is an automatic utility data upload from BC Hydro and Fortis, which I'll explain a little bit more in more detail. But when you're first starting out, I think some of the key things to note is that when you're on a specific building tab, you can see here that it'll show your gas usage or your electricity usage in the graph at the bottom there. That one there is showing natural gas usage over 3 years, and you can kind of see the peaks in the winter of when you would be using more heating energy. So obviously this building uses natural gas for space heating and also maybe domestic hot water as well. And then this graph is really useful because if there are anything out of the normal, you can then identify, what the issues are that might be in your building and trigger to have somebody come look at that and see if there's anything wrong with your equipment. And then also at the building level, you can see what your energy use intensity is and compare to a baseline year to see if the building is doing better or worse over time. And then when you first log into Portfolio Manager, you're greeted by a dashboard, which should show you all your buildings that you've uploaded into the system. And if there's data there available for them, you can choose metrics to show and compare. So I usually look at what your total energy use would be for the building, so you can see just how much energy each one is using. And again, larger buildings would typically use more energy, so not a good thing to compare, but a useful thing to know. And then, like I said, your energy use intensity, which can help to compare the energy performance of the buildings. And the last useful thing would be to have GHG emissions. And what's great is that Energy Star Portfolio Manager will calculate that for you, so you can get an idea of, say you're making a strategy to target GHG emissions reduction across all your buildings. This is a great way to say, well, this one is a greater producer of GHG emissions, and that may not be directly related to your energy consumption. It is dependent on how much natural gas you're using. And then again, at the building level, you have a metric summary, which, as I talked about earlier, compares it to a baseline year, and then you can see how the building's doing over time, which is extremely useful for troubleshooting and identifying if there might be issues with your building, and can trigger next steps. And the BC and PHA team can help you with that as well by visiting your building, doing an energy audit, and then seeing what solutions can help fix a significant increase in energy over time. And then the other benefit would be if you do have an energy efficient retrofit and you're seeing that you're not getting the savings that were predicted, this can monitor that and trigger, well, I'm not actually getting any savings from my energy retrofit. We might need to take a look there and see if there was an issue with the design or the install of the system, and is a really, really important piece to energy efficient. And like I mentioned, there is an automatic data transfer from ESBM, and really one of the important reasons why we use it. You don't want to be going in and adding utility data to this all the time. It would be extremely time consuming and really not worth it. So the great thing is BC Hydro and FortisBC, you do a one-time setup and then they automatically upload your data each month. And is a great way to go, and BC and PHA can support setting this up for you. So the important part to note with this, though, for that web services, they're only allowing this for BC Hydro and FortisBC commercial account buildings with this commercial account and our commercial customers. And so that would include apartment buildings, high-rise, low-rise, mid-rise apartment buildings, and then sometimes townhouse complexes. And this is because BC Hydro is able to aggregate all of the residential meters onto a virtual meter in Portfolio Manager. And this is great if you're not able to regularly view how much each of the residential units are consuming. And then other commercial account building types would be care facilities, office buildings, community centers, any commercial type building. And then unfortunately, single family homes are not eligible at the moment because they have less than 10 residential accounts. And you may have some apartment buildings that have less than 10 residential accounts, and unfortunately, they're not eligible at the moment. And then the other important thing with eligibility, it is only for BC Hydro and FortisBC customers. So if you're not in their service area, you wouldn't be eligible either. And you would need to do a manual upload instead of having automatic service. And so, like I said, the residential aggregation really is a key thing to this because we want to be looking at your total energy use rather than just your common area that you might manage. So in more detail about how this works, when you have those separate residential meters, BC Hydro has some request forms that you fill out that allow authorization for you to view just an aggregate of all the residential meters. And the reason it needs to be 10 plus is so you can't individually track each unit as it's a privacy concern. But it's still wonderful to see that we're able to access this data through an aggregate meter. And then in Portfolio Manager, you'll see it uploaded as a separate meter to your common account. You can track both of those. And so I think one of the greatest barriers to energy benchmarking is the time it takes to set this up. I know a lot of nonprofit organizations don't have the capacity to go in and collect all their utility account information, set up all the meters in Portfolio Manager, and figure out how to use a whole new program. And so BC and PHA wants to make this as easy as possible for you. So if this is something that you're interested in for your organization, please get in contact with us. Email energy@bcmpha.ca and we'll connect you with one of our asset management coordinators to get you started. On your end, you would simply need to fill out a permission form, and that would be collecting that basic building information we need to create a building in Portfolio Manager. That would be your address, your square footage, when it was built, how many units there are, and then if you know if your accounts are metered separately. If you don't know that, we can also inquire with BC Hydro to figure out how all of the metering works from your building. I've seen a lot of different ways buildings can be metered, and it's not always the easiest to understand. And so we can help to make sense of that and connect it accurately in Portfolio Manager for you through getting your full building energy usage in there. And then the other thing you'll need to collect is your utility bills, so both your BC Hydro and Fortis bills, and that's because we take some information on there to help validate the building in Portfolio Manager so that the utilities can upload. And then the key thing with that is they do need to be your most recent utility bills. I do stress that because the request won't be accepted. If it's not most recent, then we'll have to follow up with you again to get a more recent bill. So it's good just to check to make sure it is within the last 2 months that you received the bill. And then lastly, we'll go through your billing information and figure out if that residential aggregation is required, and then work with the individual to get that data uploaded for you as well. And then the other point to this is how it works is BCNPHA will create a portfolio manager for you on your behalf. And then at the end of all the process, we'll hand it off to you so that it is your account, your data is available for you to view. And then it's shared back to BCNPHA, who can help to monitor, troubleshoot any issues, and is very useful data for helping to advocate for the energy sector. So we are happy to support you with any of your needs, like I mentioned, building condition assessments, capital planning, energy retrofit coaching. If you're interested in all of that or energy benchmarking, please send us an email at energy@bcnpha.ca, and then we have a lovely team of asset management coordinators who specialize in energy efficiency who can help you out. And we also have a service inquiry on our website. So if you just go to bcnpha.ca to the building management section and you scroll down to the bottom, you'll find a service inquiry there. So if you have a specific request for us, you can fill that out as well, or just send us an email. Okay, we've reached the end. I'd love to open it up to questions if people have any. Let me just check the Q&A here.
I'm seeing 2 questions here, Rochelle. The first question is, how much does it cost to complete a report for a building if there is a fee? And then the other question is, does this work for rural and remote buildings?
Yeah, great questions for both. So the energy benchmarking scorecard, which I showed you, completely free, as long as your buildings are eligible for the service. So again, you need to be BC Hydro and Fortis BC customer, and then we can help assist you with your portfolio manager sign up for free, and then also create a free energy scorecard report for you. And then the second question is, yeah, the rural and remote buildings. Yes, it does work for rural and remote buildings, but again, you need to be within the BC Hydro or Fortis BC service area. So if you're with PNG, and I think there's a few regions within the interior that have their own utility service. So again, if you don't have a BC Hydro account, this won't work for you. Okay, I just saw another question here. I have Fortis for natural gas and Nelson Hydro for electricity. So yeah, unfortunately for the electricity in that case, if you have Nelson Hydro, we'll have to upload the data manually, and that there is no web services for that. But if you have a Fortis account, we can connect that data. It's still useful to have partial energy data in there, but it is best to have the total energy in there, because that's how we can give you a scorecard and compare it to other buildings. Awesome, and thanks for putting the links in the chat, Courtney, that's great, and the email as well. So please, any other questions, please pop it in the chat, or if you want to continue the conversation, please email us, and we're more than happy to answer and help you out.
Awesome. So I'm not seeing any more questions go into the Q&A or into the chat. Again, echoing Rochelle's statements, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We can continue the conversation offline moving forward as well. Big thank you to all of our folks who were able to attend this morning, and also thanks to Rochelle for spending some time explaining this feature available to our members. Awesome.
Thanks so much,
Thank you all
everybody.
again. All right, have a good rest of your day, everyone.